Hey guys, Keaton here, and welcome to what I'm unofficially calling the Weekly Throwdown. Now for anyone new to the series, this is the one time a week where we look at Vlambeer's addictive roguelike-like shooter, Nuclear Throne. This game is on Steam Early Access right now, and it's constantly in development, and every week they give the public a brand new build with new content, balancing, fixes, and miscellaneous updates. So let's get into it. Now before we get into what was added this week, let's quickly take a recap of what was added last week. Now last week we saw the addition of the IDPD, the Interdimensional Police Department. The IDPD are a brand new enemy that will occasionally phase into your world pretty much any time after the third world. And their main objective is to pretty much just throw off your game, you know. They just make the game that much more difficult. Also added was the new mutation Impact Wrists, which I accidentally called in Iron Fist last week, and I apologize. Any enemy that gets taken out by the player will fling across the room and hit anything in its path, and it causes major destruction and can clear a room pretty easily. It's pretty OP. Also added was a plant animation and mysterious statues. I have not really figured out what the mysterious statues have done, just as an update. I've seen them. They seem to take damage, but I don't know what they do. That was last week. Let's move on to this week. New content this week. We have a new area of Frozen City, and it features two new enemy types. Now, as is becoming a tradition on this show, because I'm still learning the game and not able to loop, as they call it, which is when you get to the end of what's available, it simply loops you to the start, and it's sort of like a new game plus, from what I understand. But apparently this is a very late game addition, the Frozen City, and I'm assuming that this is what they were hyping up on Twitter earlier this week. And by they I mean Vlambeer and the team that works on it, like the artists. I saw them getting really excited for something, and it sounds like the Frozen City might have been what they were talking about. I haven't seen anything of it, but I'm gonna go ahead and assume that's what they were hyped about. Now I just have to say, when I started seeing them hype something up in the first place on Twitter, I caught it as it would be late game stuff, and lo and behold, Frozen City will be accessible after beating Big Dog, which is the third world boss, which is pretty much the end of the game right now. So, if you are that skilled and you have constantly passed Big Dog, beaten him to a pulp, you should be able to access Frozen City at some point. Again, wish I had more info. I don't. I'm sorry. Another addition this week. New weapons. 3 new weapons. The first new weapon is a chainsaw. The second weapon is an energy hammer. And the third and seemingly most awesome weapon, according to Vlambeer, is the flak cannon. Now unfortunately, in an hour's worth of play, I was only able to come across the chainsaw. It feels like a much longer range screwdriver, and it works much differently from like the sledgehammer and shovel, which are more radius based. You know, the chainsaw will strike in the direction of your cursor and take out enemies. It's a pretty strong weapon, but it runs on, I'm not sure which ammo type, but yeah, it runs on an ammo type, so you have limited usage. It's not a traditional melee weapon in the same sense as the shovel or the screwdriver or the sledgehammer. Now unfortunately I did not come across the energy hammer or the flak cannon, but I'm assuming they're late game weapons and I just didn't get to play with them. A new mutation has been added as well to make crossbows that much more cooler. A new mutation called Crossbow Lungs has been added, which makes bolt-based weapons slightly honed towards your mouse cursor. So wherever you're pointing on the screen, that's where the bolt will fly. Now, I tried this a bit myself. I could not see any real significant difference. Honestly, I was hoping for something more like out of like Wanted, where you could sort of quote-unquote curve the bullet, you know? So I thought I could shoot and then change the trajectory mid-flight, you know? But from what I could see, it just worked like regular boats. In fact, it might have actually made it harder to shoot things, because I got into a situation once where I was pretty much just running around in circles with this enemy because I couldn't shoot it with the boat, no matter how hard I tried. And I don't know, maybe I'm just not that skilled. No, you know what? I'll admit I'm not that skilled with crossbows, so maybe it was just me. Alright, moving on to balances, fixes, and all that goodness. Not much in the way of player changes, it seems. It seems a lot of things have just been slightly tweaked. Snipers would take longer to fire upon start of the level, not in general, just at the start, which is kind of a good thing, because sometimes you'll get spawned and you'll have like 5 snipers on you and you'll be like, oh my god, what's going on, and you just get blasted to oblivion, and you know, you're sad, you read a poem, and you know, food loses its taste. Anyway, Plant Snare will no longer keep enemies stationary. They will eventually be able to wiggle themselves out of it, so it's no longer a way to just stop enemies in their tracks. There have been some minor changes to Big Dog. He will not trigger if you end up spawning next to him, which in my experience has happened quite a bit, where I would just spawn right next to him and he would wake up and I would just be like, well, run ruins, thank you. But apparently that has been slightly tweaked, and apparently, because I've never killed Big Dog, I cannot attest to this, but apparently when Big Dog explodes, when he dies, you'll have a much larger chance of getting away. Which begs the question if that needed balancing. Good lord, Vlambeer are some masochists. Or sadists? I don't know. Evil is the word I am looking for. Moving on, the screwdriver has received a slight buff, but in my experience, it's still not a viable option past like World 1. World 2, maybe, if you're skilled enough, if you're lucky enough, if you have the right mutations. But in World 3, if you're still using the screwdriver, you're pretty much still screwed. Impact wrists has been nerfed, which I'm very sad to see, but I know it was way too overpowered. Should have saw this coming. They said it still needs work, so I'm assuming it's gonna pretty much go the ways of extremely nerfed, to the point where we're gonna be all sad and be like, remember the days when impact wrist was a viable option? Maybe Vlambeer will surprise us and not nerf it too much in the future. And finally, a lot of the remaining fixes that are listed are a lot of late game alterations that I can't really vouch for or explain in detail. So as always, if you would like to see the full list, you can check the link in the description below, and it'll have a lovely little link there for you to click, and you can read it to your heart's content and get the full 411. And that about wraps it up for this week's update. Now, if you've been watching for a while, you're already going to probably know my feelings on this, and that is, again, my issue with Vlambeer's focus on late game content versus tweaking early game content. I'm not going to get too much into it. You know, if you want to hear my opinions, you can go back and watch the previous update videos. My feelings for it sort of have not changed. I understand why the IDPD shows up when they do. There have been some runs where the IDPD have definitely screwed me over because it's just been too much. So I understand why they're late game. I would like to see them maybe tweaked, so you see 1 or 2 early on. That would be nice. But I do want to address that I'm really concerned they're focusing way too much on post World 3 content. Now I understand that they need to keep building forward, but I feel like in building forward they're neglecting to keep the early game balanced enough to where anyone, and I mean anyone who picks up this game, can feel like they have the eventual ability to move forward without having to succumb to just the way that the developers want you to play. And again, it's because you're not getting the chance to play with other weapons. Like I was seeing the bow a lot more, which I'm assuming is because they added a new mutation and they want people to feel that mutation out. But again, barely any laser weapons, barely any cannons or bazookas or whatever's out there. My main is robot, even with upgraded throne, but you know, it's supposed to find more rare items and I'm not finding them. And I'm assuming that's because these certain weapons only show up after World like 3-2, whatever. And I think that's way too late to start introducing these kind of weapons, because A, the player never gets to really use them and understand how they work, and B, they're gonna get used to using just machine guns, assault rifles. They're not gonna learn to use things outside of those base weapons that you give them early on. And I feel like that's really hindering the gameplay. And I feel like maybe this has to do with the fans, and I feel like maybe Vlambeer are getting some bad opinions from people who are more focused on bragging about how many times they've looped and want more challenge beyond that, versus the people like myself who want to get better but are starting to lack the motivation to try, because we get to the point where the difficulty spike becomes, you need to understand how these stronger weapons and enemies work, but we're not going to introduce any of that at any time before this level, you know. So you need to always get to this level to work it out. And again, that works on a very linear game, because a linear game, you can learn patterns, you can learn what works and what doesn't. But in a game like this where everything is so random, I feel like a lot of that is lost in context. Because again, you can only get things at certain times, and I don't think it works. I don't think it shows what Nuclear Throne can be. It doesn't give people the full potential. It doesn't show people the good stuff. It doesn't show people the insane personality that Nuclear Throne has, you know. Anytime I've gotten to World 3, it's been a very fun experience, because things start mixing up, you know. The first world and second world are very static, you know, they're very boring at this point. And I don't mean that as in like, oh yeah, I've seen it all, but it's boring in the fact that you're getting assault rifles, you're getting regular bullets for the first 2 worlds, unless you're really, really lucky. And again, I always point to Binding of Isaac as a perfect example of balancing between allowing the player to mess with these crazy power-ups, but not making it so crazy that they're overpowered, you know. Because at the start, you can give someone who's completely new to Binding of Isaac, you can give them Dr. Fetus, Epic Fetus, and they're still gonna lose because they don't understand how the game plays out. But as they grow better and better at the game, they learn how to use these weapons, these power-ups, and then they build their own sort of strategy. Right now, I feel like Nuclear Throne's strategy is get mutation A, B, C, D, etc., get weapon A, B, C, D, etc., and go for it, you know. So yeah, I don't know who they're exactly talking to progress the game as it is, but I hope it's not people who are bragging about, oh yeah, I looped 12 times, bro, I need more to satisfy my E-ping ego, you know. I hope they don't forget about the people who are not as skilled but would like to get better. I do hope we get more emphasis on the early game. Maybe when they get to the point where they feel the later game is at a point where they can go back. I hope that the early game gets tweaks, because I feel it needs it. That's just my opinion. If you have yours, feel free to share it in the comments section if you would. I'll definitely converse with anyone who wants to talk Nuclear Throne, because as much as I may sound like I'm complaining, I love the game, and I urge anyone who has any sort of interest, just take the plunge. It's a fun shooter, and you know what, I just may be really bad, and you will have the time of your life, and you may go back to this video and be like, man, Keaton is just not good, you know. So yeah, that was this week's look at Nuclear Throne. I kind of went on a tangent there, but thank you for watching. I hope you've been enjoying these update videos. I enjoy making them, and yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Bye!